Okay, so a quick chronology of how we got to where we are, just so that we're all on the same page. On June 19th, I met with the Northeastern project team and talked about generally what the project is and discussed forthcoming filing of a notice of intent. At that time, they provided me with a plan prepared by Haley Aldrich, dated June 4th, 2019, showing where the proposed soil exploration was going to occur. At that time, I said that that was fine. It's in buffer zone or outside resource areas altogether, and that they could proceed with that. At the MIPA site walk on June 24th, they were starting to have the equipment delivered and mobilized for the forthcoming exploratory work. On June 28th, which was a Friday, I went out there because I was surprised by the size of the equipment and the quantity of clearing that had taken place. So I contacted Mr. McKay and asked that he provide documentation certifying that they had not crossed the threshold, the 1 acre threshold that would require a NIPDES permit or a stormwater permit under the town planning bylaw, zoning bylaw. Mr. McKay was very receptive to my request. He stopped work right away and provided that information right away, showing that indeed they were under the 1 acre threshold. That weekend, I went out to take a look, took the map with me, and while I was out there, I realized that there was some areas of work that were not indicated on the plan that was provided, which you guys have a copy of there. Mm-hmm. And not only that, the test pit, one of the test pit areas appeared to be very low, similar to the elevation in the central kind of bowl area on the site. So that's when I realized that the plan that was originally provided showed Haley and Aldrich's work only. It did not show the stormwater work done by Niche Engineering. So I think there was just a lack of coordination between the two consultants to provide all of that. So then I took a look at the FEMA maps, and that's when I realized that one of the areas was floodplain, that the work was in floodplain, and so then we went ahead and issued the enforcement order. And so here we are today to discuss what happens next and what appropriate remedial measures would be. So, do you generally agree with the timeline I provided of events?
So just for the record, my name is David Linhart with Goulson & Storrs, counsel for Northeastern. And thanks for laying out that background and for scheduling us to have a chance to explain and provide some context. So as you had noted, the intent all along was to stay in coordination. And the idea of coordinating was because it's leading up to what we would see our next step with Conservation Commission submission of a notice of intent. So these were sort of preparatory steps. And, oh yeah, I can turn with this in front of me. So the coordination was intended to set up the next step of filing of a notice of intent. And of course, with the site visit, the idea of walking the site and looking at plans, it was to identify areas that are within Conservation Commission jurisdiction and outside of. And the intent was, of course, before we file a notice of intent, stay outside Conservation Commission jurisdiction, so that any environmental due diligence would happen outside of that. The delineation and the outline that we used for the floodplain, we now understand that it wasn't the outline that Conservation Commission is using. And as soon as that was understood, as you had mentioned in going through the dates and the timeline, our approach was to adjust and use the delineation that was provided. So as a punchline, there isn't any intent to continue work in any area that's under conservation Conservation Commission jurisdiction. That's stopped until a notice of intent is filed. And the test pit that was in question, that was a test that was done in one day, is refilled, and so there's no equipment there today. It's refilled today. And so we're hoping that part of what could happen tonight is to reset what had been initially our approach, get ready for the filing of notice of intent, and we're hoping we can get back on track with that. And again, we're staying outside of any area where a Conservation Commission has jurisdiction until that notice of intent is filed.
So I think I think it was a mistake, a lack of coordination. I agree you've been very forthcoming with information about the testing that was going to happen, and we appreciate that. I think the two firms doing work, it just wasn't consolidated on a single plan. I think they used the FEMA map shape file, they dropped it onto the plan and said it was using elevation, which you're supposed to use elevation, which is why FEMA assigns elevations, because that's what you're supposed to use. So, now that we've identified that there's an issue, yes, the vegetation is cleared, no additional work is going to occur there. The remaining exploratory work that needs to happen is outside of conservation jurisdiction, correct? And how extensive is that work that remains, generally?
So Tim McKay is here as well. I don't know if you want to speak. Sure. Yep. And this is as to any work that's outside of Conservation Commission jurisdiction that would happen before the notice of intent.
So I've consulted with Haley and Aldrich, who is going to be doing the geotechnical and geothermal analysis. They've cleared about 95% of everything they need, with the exception of when they get the rig in there, if they notice the boom swings in any direction, there may be a branch or two off a tree, but nothing substantial compared to what's there right now. We anticipate 3 days of exploration, and I will keep you abreast of when that is finally scheduled and what days they'll be working on site.
Okay. So the way that again, I know this is outside of conservation jurisdiction, but the way that the access is up that hill, the rig will be able to get up that, there won't need to be any material brought in or anything?
That's correct.
Does anybody on the commission wish to provide, ask any questions?
Public access.
We'll let public provide it, but let's let the commission finish our discussion first, okay?
I'd like to request that in the future you guys present us with something to a scale that's more easily readable.
You have to talk to the mic, sorry. This mic and
These plans are not really readable, and so in the future, when you come before us, you could give us something that's, pretty easy to discern. The scale is just not useful to us.
I appreciate that, and hopefully this is something, given that we've had an extensive, public process ahead of us, we'll be back, we can be mindful of that. We did bring a board that blows up the site, and the delineations make it a little bit easier to see on the board, but I understand that where you are, the board is not obvious.
do you want to look at it?
No, I'm just, this is a typical thing, and it just doesn't work,
So I guess, obviously when we submit the notices of intent, we provide a 24/36 plan. If you provide one to the commission, just so that it's easier to see than what I sent to you. Pass it. Okay. So with that, does anybody from the audience wish to provide input?
Bill Mahoney, 179 Willow Road. I think it was atrocious what was done last week, or whenever it was, 2 weeks ago. They came in there, destroyed wetlands, went into floodplain, all sorts of resource areas. They came in with a a huge tank-like situation. They didn't care about damaging anything. They destroyed rare areas where rare species are, and they come here with a small little 9 by 12 and expect to continue. Have they talked to the planning board about going upland out of your jurisdiction? Have you?
So the work that is left to be done is outside of our jurisdiction. And the quantity of disturbance is under the threshold of what is required for a stormwater permit. And before we continue, I just want to say that let's keep comments focused on Wetlands Protection Act issues. Obviously, we have concerns about other things, but that is not our jurisdiction, and so that's just, it's not productive.
Well, they should have come in, done a silt screen after that was in the wetlands. There's vegetation on both sides. They went right into it. We've had storms. All that dirt is going into the wetland, vernal pool, I might add, and then it goes out in a 15-inch drain into bathing beach where there's lobsters right now. There's tons of small lobsters shedding. Lobsters are shedding, and there's larval stage lobsters in there. And you haven't done anything
So it does.
Are there any hay bales going on?
Well, it does seem like a fair point. I could understand driving by, seeing big equipment. You mentioned there was this big equipment and not having any context for it. So hopefully, between describing a little bit tonight that there is some work outside of Concom jurisdiction that will happen for
Well, let's go back to what she says. Let's go back into the vegetated wetlands.
Right. Oh,
What are you going to do about that?
Stay outside of it until
Aren't
the
you
notice
going
of
to repair
intent.
it?
Well,
You should be repairing it as
So
we speak.
there will, for what it's worth, the notice of intent, and I'm sure you'll be back. Look forward to seeing you when the notice of intent is filed.
Sure.
There'll be a lot to discuss of how work gets rolled out going forward. This was very preliminary, exploratory work. So, and it didn't look that way.
It was outrageous.
It didn't look that way. So it's understood. It's understood. So hopefully, yeah. But I think what we would like to do is, going forward with the NOI, going forward with appearances before the Conservation Commission, be able to explain what next steps are so there are no surprises.
But are you explaining what you're going to do? Are you going to fix what you've just done? You tore up the wetlands.
So the area where there was a test pit that was dug,
That was in the wetlands.
that is in the floodplain by the delineation that the Conservation Commission is using, and we're fine. We're using that.
We need a
We're using it.
neutral party
Yeah.
to go in there because that's
So-
wetlands.
So that pit is filled, and there's no equipment there. And within, since the notice of intent is going to be filed shortly, what does shortly mean? I mean, we're in the process of coordinating those next steps. We're not leaving it because we're going to take next steps through the Conservation
Okay,
Commission.
you need some silt barriers in there right now. It's going to rain for the next day. All that stuff's going into vernal pool, and it's going into bathing beach right now as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for your comments. It's
Well,
not, yeah.
do something. Correct it.
All right.
Hi, Christian Bauda. My question is I'm trying to understand what is actually the plan or the survey which dictates all this. Is it the MEPA maps, actually?
So it would be the topography. They provided topography in the maps. We don't have any additional mapping other than what was provided. So it's dictated by that, which hasn't been approved by the commission yet, the jurisdiction. The delineation of resource areas has not been reviewed or approved by the commission yet.
Okay.
That happens part of the notice of intent process.
So we're basically relying on the MEPA maps, the FEMA maps rather, I'm sorry, to dictate what is floodplain, what is wetlands, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that's, I think, where the mistake occurred, it appears. They
Yeah.
relied on the FEMA maps
Right.
by elevating, using the topography, which is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's when I realized that there was an error, and that's
Right.
why we issued the enforcement order.
So I guess my question is, if the FEMA maps are obviously in error, and I also took a look at the overlay of the FEMA maps on the existing, landscape there, and it's clearly an error to me. What else is an error in that property? Because the FEMA maps were changed fairly recently. The update from the old maps to the new maps shrunk the floodplain and the wetlands area by quite a bit. And I'm wondering what other areas are also actually wetlands or floodplain that are not delineated in those FEMA maps.
So I will say that the FEMA maps are illustrative. They are not the controlling document. So they're illustrated. They show you where the floodplain is. If you have topography, you use topography, which is why they identify elevations in the FEMA map. So for this, it's elevation 13. So they use the FEMA map because it was easy, probably, and they should use the topography because they had an assigned elevation for that area. In most cases, the FEMA maps show a bigger floodplain. In this case, they happened to show a smaller one, so it worked against them in this case. But in most cases, the FEMA overcalculates rather than under.
And just so I know, the center lawn where the ice house is that also FEMA elevation 13?
Yes.
Because just from eyeballing it, and if you stand on that road where the berm is between the lawn and the area that was excavated, the lower area is very clearly where there was excavated. I would say it's lower than the lawn area. So I guess, again, I would say the FEMA map seems to be wrong if it's delineating that area as 13. So is there any recourse we have as a town to require a proper elevation be done by an outside third-party entity or a government entity that can actually be objective rather than just relying on a survey done by Northeastern?
Topography, I don't think it's necessary. Topography, it's done for I don't know how you did it for this. Sometimes it's a flyover. I don't know. Do you know how you did the topography for this?
I believe there was a drone survey conducted by our civil engineer.
Yeah. So it's stamped by an engineer, and they're putting their name on the line, agreeing that it's correct. I think that looking at it, it makes sense. Clearly when you stand on the road in between the central area and the area that was disturbed, the area that's disturbed is lower. Yeah. And so I do think it was a mistake that was made. They just looked at the maps. But the topography shows that it's lower, and it is indeed lower when you stand there. So I think that the topography is accurate, in my opinion.
Okay, and the only other question I would have, given the bigger picture of the ENF that was filed by Northeastern, obviously that area is one of the places they want to put a parking lot. And I'd like to know how your plan is going to change relative to what's been discovered at this meeting and the digging that you did.
Well, that's not to sound evasive, but it's still an open question of what those plans will ultimately end up being, because this process with Conservation Commission is exactly to propose ideas and have those get worked out in a public forum. So it would be overstepping, our authority to say this is what we're going to do, because it's subject to Conservation Commission approval and this public process. So we're going to bring plans. You'll see them. You'll give feedback, and we'll see where we end up.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. David Lurie. I'm a lawyer representing the Nahant Preservation Trust. I have a few questions. I think the first thing I'd like to do is to determine which area we're talking about. I have some graphics that will help us determine that. I think there are three areas that I'm curious about. One, I understand to be entirely within the flood zone, both under the State Wetlands Act and under the Local Wetlands Act. And that is the big area that I'm going to show you a graphic that's marked in green here, and I have photos of. There are two other areas that I understand are within the buffer zone to land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is governed by the Nahant Local Wetlands Bylaw, And I would like to know from you whether or not you intend to do work in those 2 other areas as well. You've said, I've heard you, that you intend to do no more work within the area that's within land subject to coastal storm flowage until you file an NOI, but I'd like to know what you plan to do, if anything, on these other 2
Or
areas.
at least within Conservation Commission jurisdiction.
And this is
what- yeah.
within Conservation Commission jurisdiction?
Sure.
Okay, so with your permission, so let me distribute these. So here's one map. These were prepared by our civil engineer, CDM. So, if you direct your attention to the lower left-hand corner of the map, you'll see a bigger green area, and that is the area that I understand is within both state and local wetlands resource area within land subject to coastal storm flowage. Are we agreed about that? Is that the area you were talking about earlier?
Well, I guess I mean, that's in the general area. Yes. That's in the
Okay.
general area.
So I'd like, just like
Well,
confirmation.
I don't mean it evasively. I'm just sort of, we're both looking at small plans. I assume that you've located in the right place. It looks like the right place.
Okay, I understand this is all subject to the accuracy of our engineers' delineations.
Yeah.
Gotcha. With that assumption,
Yeah.
is that the area you're talking about, that you're not going to do further work in?
I know, yes. Let me just say yes, but let me say even broader. We're working very closely with Kristen. We're not even taking next steps at all without keeping Kristen in the loop. So we are deferring to Kristen's judgment about where Conservation Commission has jurisdiction, and we're not trying to challenge that. So that's why I know it sounds like I'm not talking specifics, but if Kristen tells me that area, that's floodplain, we're staying outside of it.
Well, that's fair. I'm sure everybody appreciates it, but in our view, you and your engineers got the mapping wrong. You mapped it according to electronic transfer of FEMA maps rather than according to the 13-foot flood elevation height for an AE zone, which you should have done. And as the result, you excavated and cleared an area that's governed by both state and wetlands, local wetlands bylaw, not just in a buffer zone, but within that flood zone. So forgive me if I want some specifics here. And I think it would be helpful if I give you the photographs that I'm talking about. So we'll just make sure we're on the same page. Here are photographs that were taken by our engineer at the same time that Kristen did her site walk. And the area I'm talking about is photo number 3.
This is incorrect. This is incorrect.
Which I believe is the same area that Christian was earlier referring to as having been excavated to a lower elevation, and it's one of the bigger areas that was excavated. So are we talking about the same area? That's the area that you say was filled back in?
It appears to be, yes.
Okay. All right. So do you agree that that's within the wetland resource area, not even the buffer, just the wetland resource area under both the state and wetlands bylaws, local wetlands bylaws?
According to what we understand from Kristen, yes.
Are you
Let me
going to?
just interject here. So there are 2 sets of work that were done, right?
Yeah.
Niche engineering doing stormwater work,
Yeah.
which was this lower work, right? And then the upper region work, which is Haley and Aldrich. So niche is done with your stormwater exploratory, correct?
Yeah.
So nothing additional in the lower section needs to occur.
Right.
Correct.
Not this time, not by net for stormwater purposes, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's all the upper region work that
Yeah.
needs to occur.
Okay, so let me just confirm what upper region means. So if you look at the map that I gave you in the lower left-hand corner, there are 2 other areas one marked in green and one marked in pink, which we believe to be within the 100-foot buffer zone under the local wetlands bylaw and partially within the buffer zone under the local wetlands bylaw. And those are reflected in photos numbers 1 and 2 in this package of photos that I need. So do you plan to do any further work in those areas?
Because of how we're, yep. So we're trying to think through how to be responsive, but also, given that these aren't materials that we prepared and reviewed, it's tricky on the spot to say, that we were able to verify any of this. I'm not calling into question anything, but
I hear you. This is new to you. I just want
so
confirmation
there was no
that
chance to
for
review
these
it,
two
so,
additional areas, are you going to be doing any work? And
So,
if so,
I know
what's
this
the
is
character
going
of
to
that
sound
work?
like a broken record, but I'm just, you're saying these two areas. It's not something we had a chance to review. Going back to what we said, there are areas that we understand are under Conservation Commission jurisdiction. That includes floodplain. As you're calling out, there are also buffer areas. Buffer areas, those are Conservation Commission. There are also certain exceptions. That's just how Conservation Commission jurisdiction works. It's not, we are submitting to that jurisdiction, and as to this specific enforcement order, we've been asked to stay outside of certain areas, and we're staying outside of those areas, and that's, and then we'll be back for the notice of intent.
Well, in our view, these two additional areas that are shown in photos numbers 1 and 2 are within Conservation Commission jurisdiction because they are 100 foot outside of land subject to coastal storm flowage. If your position is that you can continue to work in that area because you are doing testing, I want to know what that work is going to consist of so the Conservation Commission can make a determination about whether or not that meets the standards for an exception under both the state and the local wetlands bylaw for work in a 100-foot area. So it's just so you have all the information so you can answer that question.
But, so
Which is tied to the photos and will show you where the photos are located. And this was also prepared by CDM. So it will identify where the photos are so that there's no ambiguity about the areas that I'm talking about.
So just to reiterate, the work remaining to be done is work by Haley and Aldrich, correct? So it's the work that you gave me on this plan?
Correct.
Correct. So the areas in photos 1 and 2 and 3 were the niche engineering work, which is complete. That was the stormwater work that's required for the notice of intent. That's complete, and there's no additional work that needs to be done there because Haley and Aldrich is not showing any work on this plan that they provided, correct?
Correct.
So I guess the only outstanding thing that perhaps could be happening at the cusp of conservation jurisdiction is this one here. Or is that done? This one done. I know it's done.
Is that the one in front of
Yeah.
the bunker?
Yeah, in front of the bunker.
Looks to be boring.
So this you provided me. Do you know if that test pit has been done yet or needs to be done?
I don't believe it's been completed.
Okay, so that would be the only item that would be within conservation jurisdiction that remains outstanding. It appears based on the plans you provided me previously. Okay, and that's an area that it's already a roadway, or what is that currently? Do you know? Like what is currently there?
It's, I wouldn't classify it as a roadway.
grass,
Yeah,
Just a gravel drive?
right.
It's the gravel drive.
Correct. It's a gravel drive in that area that we're talking about, that additional test pit in front of the bunker. It's basically between a gravel drive and some grass areas that's right off, grass areas that are right off the edge of the gravel roadway in front of the bunker there. That's one of the test pits that we are just talking about that still needs to be performed.
So is that shown on this plan right here?
Yes.
Can you point to it so that people can see what we're talking about?
This location right here. This location right here. Marked in red.
So it's my understanding from what I just heard is that no further work is going to be done in areas number 1 and 2, because that's already been done.
Correct.
Okay.
That's my understanding as well.
All right. What further work is going to be done in the other disturbed areas that are not outside the Conservation Commission jurisdiction, but which I understand are for purposes of geothermal well testing?
Well, just to be clear, informationally, because we're trying to not have any surprises, and Tim can go over again what we were saying that we are looking to do. We're not doing it without coordination with Kristen. So I think we're here tonight looking at what happened and assessing that. But wouldn't the normal course be that if we did something wrong, which is you're trying to figure that out, if we're on the verge of it, wouldn't the approach be that there's a reason to come back because there's another enforcement order? I mean, we can tell you what the next steps are that we're planning on, subject to coordination with Kristen. So is that,
That's what I'm trying to find
right?
out. I heard you say that you were going to do 3 days of geothermal well
That's right.
testing. Well, are you going to drill a test well?
So again, so so Tim can mention again what the next steps are. It's in coordination with Kristen. So I wonder if you're asking questions to us that really, Kristen's going to use her discretion to say what the next steps are, right? You're
the one with the information. She doesn't know what you're doing. You do. So tell us what you plan to do.
She has the authority, which we're acknowledging. But do you want to talk about what the next steps are? And it might sound redundant, but.
Sure. There's a series of geotechnical and geothermal test wells and borings that we are proposing, and the location and the depth of those wells was transmitted to Ms. Kent.
And is it within the area that you've already cleared at the end of the access road, south of the bunker?
Generally, again, we're about 95% complete with the clearing.
Do you plan to do more?
I don't know if we can answer that until the rig is out there.
All right. Well, just so for the record, there was discussion about the stormwater bylaw and that it's really outside the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction and that there was less clearing than the 1 acre that's involved. In our view, you're clearing 5 acres. You're destroying the meadow. What you've already done, which by our engineer's calculation, which is on those sheets, is around 0.7 of an acre, but you can't segment it. It's part of the whole. So you've already violated the stormwater bylaw. You ought to be going to the planning board for a permit.
Alternatively, they can file a notice of intent, and that gives us jurisdiction. Correct.
So will these warrants go forward prior to the notice of intent? The geotechnical work prior, you can do that prior to the notice of intent?
We haven't scheduled that yet, but the goal is to do that as soon as possible.
Before the notice of intent?
Yes.
So in our view, you've already violated the public's right to an easement over the meadow. I understand Northeastern and the trust just have a difference in opinion over that, but the clear cutting was a surprise. It was shocking to the public. It was upsetting to the trust. It not only violated the local wetlands bylaw and the state wetlands regulations, but we believe your work in the upland is also illegal, and it would not be good if you continued it.
Thanks for your comments, and I hope that we're not coming across as combative, because it's fair for you to say this. We are recognizing that there is an authority that makes decisions about this, and we're not fighting those decisions. We're trying to cooperate, and the next step is to submit the notice of intent to give more detail to the next steps. I mean, we're walking through the process as closely as we understand that we're able to do.
Let's be clear. You've also made a MIPA filing, an ENF filing. You've also made a supplemental memorandum to that, which did not even acknowledge the existence of a local wetlands bylaw, which did not even map the 100-foot buffer outside land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is subject to jurisdiction of the conservation under the local wetlands bylaw. It did not show that both your north and south parking lots fall almost entirely within that flood zone area. It did not show that you're planning on altering some 20,000 square foot of impervious area that falls within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission and which is beyond the 5,000-foot presumptively barred impervious area within the local flood zones. So let's be straight.
That's, the comment period is still open. Sounds like you might have comments that you want to submit during the comment period, and the period is still open for you to submit.
And we will be. Thank you.
Jennifer McCarthy, 19 Range Road. First of all, thank you to the Conservation Committee. Kristen, I'd be very careful because they're trying to hang you out to dry. We're going to go by what Kristen says. Kristen's going to tell us what to do. They're hanging you out to dry so that when something like this happens in the next step, well, Kristen told us to do this. And then for the Conservation Committee, I'd like to know, because they did do work in the wetlands area, I know they can't go back and replant every tree, but are you going to require them to fix some of the damage or put up berms so that the mud doesn't flow into the water like Billy was saying?
So I think, at the end of this, we'll have a conclusion about what next steps are. I think, we want to let everybody provide input before we make that decision this evening. So there will be some kind of resolution for this and next steps going forward.
Hi, Michelle Capano, 29 Ocean Street. Couple questions, couple comments. First is, how many test pits are you going to be doing?
We can give a number of what's been planned so far. Yeah.
We've done 6, I believe. We don't have any more to do.
You've done 6 to date, and there are no more that are going to be done.
Test pits.
No more test pits, right.
Okay, how many borings are you going to do? I know they're 2 separate activities.
I don't know that off the top of my
head. It's on the order of 9 that we're showing on plans.
9 test borings, and you have those
I'm
clearly
saying on the order of these things. This is not being invented now, so it's all
I understand.
plans that we are submitting.
No, I recognize that, and there are some adjustments that have to be made.
Yeah.
So in terms of the plans that are going to be defined for the test borings, you're going to clearly have those identified, correct? And submit those plans to Conservation for review, so the public can review them as well.
We previously identified and transmitted those locations to Ms. Kent.
Okay.
We previously identified and transmitted those locations to Ms. Kent.
Okay. And then I think, as you've already heard, everyone was pretty upset from the clear cutting, obviously. What we didn't hear was the effort that you made to survey that land before you clear cutted to make sure you did not impact any of the vegetation and the habitats and, migratory animals or birds in there. So what are you going to do? You said you have more activity work to do. You could be impacting further. Just as a point of reference, there were beehives there. The bees are gone. And if you want to check that out, you can go visit those beehives. They're empty, and that was a result of the clear cutting and the work that was done. Had you surveyed the site before you walked through there, all you would have done is walk through and then say, okay, what are these beehives here? Do we need to move them out of the area so they're protected? You would have gained a lot of good faith with the town, but you didn't do that. So, and those were there for a reason, obviously. So now they're gone. You can't bring them back, not to the faith of the town. So I would think about that in terms of what other information you need to put out there to gain that public trust. I'm not clear, though, in terms of that location that you were talking about that you still need. Is that, you said that's in front of the Murphy bunker, so is that paved? Because someone said it was gravel, and I think it's paved. So you're going to rip up the pavement, and then how are you going to dispose of the material?
This is a test boring, so it's a relatively small footprint.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
And there is no pavement in there. This is gravel roadway.
It's a gravel roadway? Okay. All right, thank you very much. And
It's basically an auger, so it'll
Go
right
down,
through. You don't
yeah.
have to cut up a big.
all right, thank you, and thank you to the Conservation Commission.
I just want to point out, this is an unusual situation because I think what most people are concerned about is outside of the conservation jurisdiction. So the mistake happened to be made within our jurisdiction, but the majority of what's going on here and what's going to continue to happen is outside of our jurisdiction. So while, people are obviously upset and they are being kind enough to tell me what's going on, they don't have to do that. It's nice that they're keeping us updated about what's going on, but they don't have a responsibility to do that because it's outside of our jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Just a side note.
Debbie Vanderslice, 368 Nahant Road. And I want to tell the Concom, I appreciate all of your efforts on this matter. I want to tell Northeastern that when I moved here 20 years ago, I was so excited about the Marine Science Center being down the street that one of the first things I did with my husband was contact the Office of Giving to see how we could leave money in our will to the Marine Science Center. That's the truth. However, recent actions have really been disparaging, and I personally, and Kristen, I'd like your input on this, I personally don't think it's enough to do a mea culpa, like we're sorry we did this, we won't do it again, but if we do, Kristen will cite us. I don't think that's enough. So I'm just wondering, is there any way, Kristen, that we can levy a fine against Northeastern for what they did? Well, maybe they will, but they won't look any better than they're looking tonight. So I think we should, well, I don't know who makes these decisions, but I personally feel that, and I might have heard you wrong, sir, but that you said, well, if we do, go beyond the scope that is expected of us, Kristen will cite us. To me, that does not sound earnest. That it sounds like, if we make a mistake, we'll just take the blame after the fact, but I don't think that's good enough. I don't know if you understand how much people in Nahant love East Point. And so for you to come in and violate a wetland to us is, and that day was, I was like the third person on site, a very atrocious act. I don't know if you know, the day after, all the bees were down on the fence in front of the Coast Guard station. The fence going like this, they were in the sign of a cross. We had to pay people to remove the bees. This is a sad situation, and I'm going to urge Concom to please consider making some kind of penalty for this gross violation. Thank you.
Marilyn Mahoney, 179 Willow Road. I'm trying to understand why Northeastern started this devastation when they haven't gone through getting the approval yet from MEPA. To me, it would have made perfect sense for you to go through that process before you disturbed one piece of property up there at East Point, because you may end up having to do an environmental, you should, by the way, the very least for the Nahant residents, do an environmental impact study, because Northeastern faculty and students commute in and commute out of this community. We live here. You're going to impact us. And I think we need to know 100% the whole truth of what the environmental impact is going to be on the people that have a vested interest in this community. We've bought our homes and we pay taxes and we have a right. And you have absolutely messed up royally. Because what you should have done from day one is involve the community. You've been at this for years, and we had to discover it on our own last year. Shame on all of you. You wouldn't like it in your backyard. Under the purview of the Conservation Commission, I have witnessed Northeastern just doing whatever the hell they please to do. At the beach where I live, skin divers have been coming every single week in good weather and plucking eelgrass out of the ocean without a permit. Isn't that interesting? Because the Department of Environmental Protection knew enough to go to the Conservation Commission and get a permit, but not Northeastern. Oh no, they just do whatever they want. And then they send the students down there with buckets, big orange buckets that you can see in the greenhouse, and filled them with sand, which is against the law, by the way, to remove sand. Did they go to the Concom and ask permission for that? No. And probably the most atrocious thing that probably is not under the Conservation Commission just happened last week. You had 9 Northeastern people on the beach, 2 professors on the sand, 1 person in a kayak, and 6 divers out there at low tide between the boats with 1 flag. We had to get the harbor master to come down. He had to educate your staff, that they needed to have 1 flag for every 2 divers, and they were not to go beyond 100 feet of those flags. So in my mind, Northeastern thinks they own this community already, flexing their muscles, doing whatever they want. Shame on you. You don't live here. It's not impacting any of you that are here tonight. You're going to commute out of here. You don't care about us, but we do. We care about the birds, the bees, the flowers, the trees, the fish, the lobsters that you have been killing and continue to do so. Shame on you, your university. You could go to an urban district, help to bring a deprived area back, and be leaders for students in those communities. But no, you want to come to the smallest town in the state of Massachusetts, 1 square mile, 1 way in and 1 way out, and you want to destroy us. Again, shame on you, and I encourage you to slap fines on them for everything that they've done without permits.
Is that right? Is that right, sir?
Hi,
is
Gene Canty, 2 Lafayette Terrace, and I'm also on the planning board. I just have to ask a question of everybody. Who has been up there to see the work they've already done, or the disturbance of the destroyed property? So you know what we're talking about. How many of you have actually gone up there? This is shameful. You're off on the wrong foot, the wrong start. You were talking there a few minutes ago about if this was a real serious situation, there would have been an environmental penalty. It is a serious situation. And you're talking about geodetic drilling that's only a small hole this size. Did anybody see that up there? Anybody at all? You've destroyed an acre of property. It's not only wetlands, it's not only floodplains, it's also a natural resource area, it's a recreational park. This isn't just these guys. You're going to have to go before 5 other boards and the building inspector. And you're not off to a good start. And I must ask the question, why would you do that without filing a permit?
So, look, we do appreciate these comments.
It's a simple question.
Well, I'm trying to think about how to answer it in a respectful way because this is your home, that was said.
Yes, it is.
Right? This is your home.
It's all our home.
And it's hard to say a short answer and then sound like we're listening and taking seriously your concerns. So you just mentioned there are several boards that we need to go through, and it would help to be on the right foot to start that process. There's no question that there's a long way to go, and I hope it doesn't sound disrespectful to say that we're deferring to Kristen. That's actually not intended in any way to hold anyone on the Conservation Commission, accountable for our decisions. That's to show deference. Recognize that, and we need to show that deference for the boards and the authorities that we need to follow through for next steps. So, if we can get a dialogue where maybe there's trust that was broken and there's work to fix that, but there's a long road to walk before this can actually be built. And the work that was done so far, this might sound like cold comfort, but it's not pre-construction work in the sense of, here's a project, let's start building. It's stuff that, for example, a test pit, and now I'm speaking, you know, a little bit over my head because I'm an attorney, I'm not an engineer, but it's a test pit to say, what is the percolation rate? How does the water come through the soil? So that when a MEPA filing is done, so that when government officials are looking at the impacts of the project, there's an understanding of how the land works so that it can be preserved. So I think that, you know, this type of early exploratory work, the intent of it is to understand the environmental condition and work sensitively when that pre-construction work actually happens, which is down the road, and there's a lot of public process to get there.
If I could, in all due respect, what are you, if you're not a lawyer or an engineer?
Oh, I say I'm speaking as a lawyer, not as an engineer.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah, you sound like one.
I probably do, yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
No, this is off to a bad start. It's going to get worse, and I think the reason it will is you guys are going to push it.
Well, it'd be nice if it gets better. It'd be nice if it gets better.
That's what I read. You're going to push it. You're going to try to get this done as quick as you can because there's other impediments ahead of you.
Well,
take this
we'll
town
have to,
into consideration and what it's been going through. Don't make it just a project.
No, I think you're right. There's a road to walk. I assume everyone in this room is going to be here at the next meeting, at the meeting after that, and we've got to
grow.
The supplemental filing, and I don't know if this sounds like familiar terms, but yeah, but the idea, so that, again, you know, some of this depends on if there's trust or not, but the idea of the supplemental filing was to respond to the comments that we had received up to that point. So instead of closing the comment period in the normal length, we agreed to extend that period and provide additional information, and that is trying to be responsive to comments through the public process. I mean, that is the purpose of the public process. We would see this, the feedback that you're bringing, as also part of the public process that we need to respond to.
You could even measure twice and cut once. I'm
Is
sorry,
that-
I mean, that is the easiest.
I'm done, thank you.
Look directly at what you're supposed to do to make sure it's right before you do anything else. So the faith is gone. We have no more faith. I mean, the first thing you did was a huge mistake. How is this going to span the whole project?
Are there any additional comments related to wetlands issues specifically?
My name is Paula Devereaux. I live at 4 Interville Road. And I wanted to ask Northeastern, given the issues that you have had in the maps, the misrepresentation of the maps or the unknowing of the maps and things, for the work that Northeastern is doing, is it totally necessary in order to file the notice of intent? Or is it work that can wait until a notice of intent is filed?
Well, I think it's fair to say there's a combination. This is all in the bucket of understanding the site to know what next steps to take. So it probably sounds...
That's not my answer. That wasn't my question. My question is what work, okay, so let me ask it a different way. What work is required to be done in order to file the notice of intent?
Yeah, we can ask that question directly.
The test pit that's in question tonight was required for the notice of intent.
And is that one, or how many test pits?
The one test pit that's in question tonight was required for the notice of intent.
And
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the test pits that were already done were the ones that were required for the notice of intent. Test pits are the ones looking at soils, looking at stormwater, where they're going to put stormwater. So that's what's required for the notice of intent.
Okay, so,
The rest is ancillary to-
okay, so would Northeastern be willing, given the level of issues that were raised here tonight, to not do any other work except for the work that's required for the notice of intent?
I mean, that seems like a fair question. We should bring that back to the team and say this is a very important concern for everyone who showed up tonight, for us to listen to those concerns. So, I can go so far for speaking for Northeastern. But this seems like a fair concern that you're raising, and we should engage with that directly.
I think can the Conservation Commission order that? I mean, so so the enforcement order is still in effect, which means that they can't do anything anywhere or anything within jurisdiction?
Anything within jurisdiction.
So are you planning on lifting the enforcement order tonight?
We'll talk about it, but, the work, they were willing to stop the work on the upper region because of what's going on. They were willing to do that. They did not have to do that. The upper stuff that's outstanding is stuff that they don't need our permission to do, unfortunately.
Whose permission do they need?
They don't need.
Maybe the planning board for the stormwater bylaw?
Conservation land, they don't need permission?
It's not conservation land, it's not under the wetlands, we are Wetlands Protection Act, Wetlands Protection Bylaw, period, that is all. So any of the other stuff is, we can pull it into what we're doing, like NIPD's, stormwater discharge, construction permits, that kind of stuff, we can pull it in under the notice of intent process, but it is not, we don't have the ability to stop Northeastern from doing stuff on the upper portion of the program.
Well, I will say that, given that you're in the MIPA comment period, that there is this enforcement issue, this order that's out there, that I would strongly suggest that Northeastern agree to do no other work except exactly what's required for the notice of intent.
Hi, Alice Court, 7 Valley Road. I wanted a clarification that has to do with the Conservation Commission and something that Mr. Lurie said. What I understand is that this recent work took up 0.7 acres, and he mentioned that you're not really allowed to segment the different projects, but it all has to be considered as a single project. And therefore, you had stormwater digging occurring, and we noticed that you started clearing large amounts of land last year all around the same area. So one of my questions has to do with what gets triggered when more than 1 acre is involved. A special permit or a notice of intent needs to be filed is what I understood. Is that correct?
So if more than 1 acre is disturbed, they are required to file a NIPD's construction permit, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System construction permit, which is EPA permit. It's a self-reporting, they fill out a form, they send it off, that's all they have to do.
And so
Another trigger would be, it's also 1 acre, it's the town stormwater bylaw, which is under the purview of the planning board. So they would either need to do that, or alternatively, they can file a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission, and then the Conservation Commission would handle that process.
So did any of those things occur when you add these together because they're all part of the same project?
Well, you mentioned the 0.7 figure. In our calculation, we've disturbed 0.4 acres. I'm not saying that to be combative. I'm just saying these are the numbers that we're working with. So,
But you said 0.7.
It was said in discussion, but for us, the bigger thing is there's a threshold at 1 acre. In due course, we will get to 1 acre. We will need to file for NIPD's. We are in the process of getting ready for NOI. So we're not avoiding any of that. We just haven't hit that threshold.
Well, actually, what I understood from Mr. Lurie was that you have, and we know that with the clearing that you performed last year on that hillside, it would seem that when you add that together with the 0.4 or 0.7 acres that you just cleared 2 weeks ago, that you have passed that threshold. So I would concur that it's time for a notice of intent to occur. It's also interesting to say, and you can apologize again, but that one of the requirements of the test pits that you did happened to be illegal, and therefore the information that to have dug that test pit, and therefore the information that you've obtained from that, you know, should all be suspect. So I'm again supportive of there being some penalty more than just letting you guys say, gee, we're sorry. We know how hard it is to grow things on Nahant, and when all of those trees and the road was cleared, those are things that even if you say you're sorry are not going to come back all that readily. People have already talked about the bees and so forth. So I would again ask the Conservation Commission to look at the entirety of the project and not just this 0.48 or 0.7 acre that they cleared 2 weeks ago, because we know they've cleared a lot more of that land that if you look at the entire project. Thank you.
My name is Rob Steinberg, 33 Winter Street. I've been involved when I was a lawyer 25 years ago in a lot of wetlands disputes involving major developments. And I've never seen anything like this. Typically, and maybe it's by virtue of the fact, you know, you got a small town, and I guess you're taking the position that you are required to follow our wetlands law. Is that you're not claiming we're nonprofits and none of this applies to us? You're saying either voluntarily or legally you're required to follow. Is that correct?
We're saying we're on the way to submitting an NOI, yes.
Didn't answer the question. Are you legally required to follow our wetlands law, yes or no?
Well, it's a, you know, this just doesn't seem like the forum to...
I want to know the answer to it. I'm a citizen. You're affecting my life.
Yeah.
Are you required to follow our wetlands law? And I don't understand. It sounds like you're volunteering and you're following some things and not other things. Is that your position? Or is your position you're going to follow the laws of this town?
We're following the laws of this town. We're filing because we are proposing work. Right now, we are proposing work that will be under Concom jurisdiction, and that's why we're taking that next step to file the NOI. These are proposed plans, nothing that's happening.
No, I get that, but you're saying you're going to follow the laws of the town.
We're going to file for what the proposal is today. I mean, it's a proposal.
That doesn't matter. You're following the laws of the town. Okay, so typically in disputes of this type, what happens is the governmental authorities said, we'll look at the hydrology of the site, we'll look at the vegetation, we'll look at the soils, and we'll present you with a wetlands delineation. And we'll also look at altered wetlands on the site. So for example, if you paved over a wetland 20 years ago, that's still a wetland. And doing anything in that area is all considered wetlands. So, you know, when I hear our wetlands are based on, you know, FEMA maps or topography, that's not, I don't know if that's your definition of a wetlands or not, but under federal regulation, a wetland is defined by vegetation, hydrology, the vegetation, hydrology, and the soils. And I don't know if we've looked at that, but what I might want to suggest, and you know, maybe you can comment on this, Kristen, if we haven't, and I don't know how we define wetlands for purposes of our wetlands bylaw, whether it's governed by state law or the typical federal definition that's been adopted nationwide. But a good enforcement action here, I believe, would be, since we're a small town, can't afford to do much, is get an independent third person mutually acceptable to the town and to Northeastern to delineate what the wetlands are, so we're all working off the same page about what is wetlands and what is not wetlands, because it doesn't sound like we're doing that. Well, so that's my recommendation for enforcement action.
So, for what it's worth, it sounds great to have certainty of this is the delineation of wetlands that we're all working off of, and we're not trying to avoid that. I don't think we can get through the NOI without having a mutual agreement on the delineation. So I'm not saying the way, you know, whether it needs a third party, but we'll never get through this with multiple definitions of protected areas.
Yeah, but your mitigation action affected the wetlands without knowing where they
That sounds, the one area that was in question, the floodplain? Well, I guess, yeah, it's hard for me to, yeah. Yeah.
So I will say this is an unusual, the way things have progressed here has been unusual. Typically, you go through MIPA and you don't do anything until you're done MIPA. And then you come. So I've been doing this professionally for 15 years, and for 10 years I was a consultant, and then for the last 5 I've been a conservation agent. In the time that I've done this, you know, you go through MIPA first before you do anything else. You get your certificate and then you move on to what's next. Typically, it's the Conservation Commission. In some cases, if you think that the delineation of the wetlands is going to be open to interpretation or perhaps an issue, you would request that the commission review and approve the wetland delineation. That's maybe what they should have done here because it would have taken that issue off the table. Clearly they didn't, and here we are. So we can't go back, you know. At this point, no additional work is proposed within areas subject to the Conservation Commission jurisdiction. Everything is up on a hill, it's outside our jurisdiction. There are other various laws that could potentially kick in and govern what they're doing, but it isn't us. So what's next for us is they come to us with a notice of intent. And then we have project plans, they're fully determined, they know where the stormwater is going, they know where they want to put buildings, parking lots, etc. And then we review that on its merits. You know, we review whether it complies with the laws, whether it complies with stormwater, whether it complies with our bylaw. So, you know, I agree that this, when I was a consultant, this isn't how we would have done things. But here we are, and so now we need to work from where we are. You know?
It's surprising if you've got a major institution like a landowner, you know, who doesn't know anything about law. It's shocking.
Just a point, you said you obey the Nahant laws. I heard you say that. Well, the upland is in a natural resource zone. If you look at the uses in the zoning bylaws, you're not supposed to have construction. Have you gone to the planning board to talk with people?
Well, this is beyond the scope tonight. I'm not trying to push her off, but
have you been up there to see what you guys did?
you know,
You were
again,
in the uplands, big time.
we definitely need to talk this through in a public forum, and there are going to be a lot of opportunities to do it.
Right now.
It's just, you know, we're trying to resolve this question about the enforcement order in the wetlands. So just trying to stay,
Yeah,
but
Christian
not
said
ignoring
you're
it.
not going there
Not
because
ignoring it.
What are you going to do about the uplands? Have you talked to the planning board? Have you got permission to go in the uplands?
I don't know if there's anything I can say that's going to satisfy you right now.
Yes
but
or no? Did you go talk to the planning board?
I think yes and no are both unsatisfying. So it's a conversation that we need to have, right?
If you say yes, then you can tell me what you talked about. If you said no, maybe you should go to the planning board and talk to them.
Okay. So you'll be the last.
Sarah Christie, 66 Ocean Street. I just want to say to the Concom, seeing the bees at the life-saving station broke my heart. And it also didn't surprise me one bit, because this act was completely consistent with the way they've handled things since day one, which was probably years before we even knew anything was going on. We can't expect Northeastern and the chancellor or whoever it is that's got an ego so big that instead of making a point of helping an area in need, you know, where the infrastructure that can handle them, then they're going to instead use the guise of a marine science center to ruin our environment. We can't expect anything different from them at any step along the way. And I urge you to use whatever power we have, which is very small compared to them, to impose a fine or whatever. We just have to do everything we can possibly do, please.
You know, obviously the commission is in an uncomfortable situation here. We have our personal opinions about those don't necessarily jive, but we gotta do the best we can here. And so, I think we need to figure out what the best steps are going forward, what's reasonable, and set some clear expectations so that we're all on the same page going forward about what's going to happen and what we expect and what kind of communication needs to happen. Here's my proposal, and we can talk about this a little bit. So Tim and I had talked a little bit about installing some erosion controls in the area that was disturbed in the floodplain, and you were amenable to installing those.
Yeah, we're
correct?
done in 2 weeks.
I agree, it should have been done. We had talked about it. That's going to be required, is installing erosion controls. It's next to a wetland. It's at the same elevation. If we had a big storm, there's nothing to say that the water couldn't come in there and bring all that material out. I'd like to see a timeline for the work that's forthcoming. I understand that it's fluid and it's based on things that you can't control, including NEPA, but I would like to see an order of how things are going to progress. You know, we finish NEPA, we file a notice of intent, you know, whatever it is, we finish exploratory work. I'd like to see a time frame for that. You know, it's an interesting situation because our bylaw says that we don't want to see a notice of intent before you're done NEPA, but here we are, you've disturbed something. I don't see any value in having them file a notice of intent before they finish NEPA. It's not going to change what happened, and I just think it won't be a fully conceptualized project before they finish that process. You know, there may be things that come out of it. I don't see any value in coming back for amendments, going back and forth on it. If you guys disagree, that's totally fine. I'd like to see coordinated plans for all consultants, not Haley and Aldrich's plan that doesn't include Mitch's work, that doesn't include whatever else is going on. I want to see all of it together so that we can fully understand what's going on. I think the reason this happened was because Mitch's work wasn't shown on any of the plans. And I know it was an oversight because of lack of coordination, but it can't happen anymore. One of the things for the ongoing exploratory work that had been mentioned was that you may need a NIPD's dewatering permit. Have you filed for one yet?
I don't believe so, but that is currently in the works.
Okay, so I'd like a copy provided to us before the exploratory borings proceed. The NEPA supplemental info that was provided, the Conservation Commission did not get a copy of it. I'd like a copy emailed to us right away. Tom, you mentioned wanting to see the test pit and boring logs. We want to complete the geotech work. We'd like a copy of those provided to us.
And at this point, why don't we hire a third party to come in and advise us on this?
Until they file, we don't have, the town will be paying for it. So I think for now.
Can you repeat that? We can't hear you.
Tom recommended that we hire a third party to review.
Good idea, Tom.
We could do that, it would be at the town's expense.
No, it's not their
No,
expense.
unless they're willing to do.
Ask them if they're willing to pay for it?
I was just gonna say, unless they're willing to pay for it, which is, would be great.
Give them a fine instead.
That being said, when they file a notice of intent, we will be hiring one at their expense. Absolutely, when that happens, we've already talked about that. As far as fines.
A neutral one or one that?
Our choosing. It would be a neutral at our choosing. As far as fines, we do not have a fine structure included in our wetlands bylaw regulations. As such, it is governed by the police fine structure, right? Is that correct? Non-criminal disposition. So the fine for a first offense is $25.
Go for it.
I mean, we can do that.
Symbolic anyway.
Yeah, go for it.
It's certainly fine. On the $25.
Per day, per month.
I mean, we had enforcement order before us, before Northeastern. We slapped them on the hand and they walked away. I understand that's a resident, but I want to treat everybody fairly. I don't want to be punishing people they didn't get a permit first, but if they come to us and they want a permit and they requested the permit to disturb that area, conceivably we would say yes. If that's not part of the plan, one of the things I would like to see is mitigation in that area. I don't know what the plan is, but that's one of the things that I would like to see is some kind of mitigation. But I think it's premature to ask for that, given we don't know what's forthcoming.
My name's Emily Potts, 114 Pond Street. I am concerned about this mistake. A big machine went down there. We all saw it and dug out. Before the worst of the damage was done, they tore out another area. That area was loaded with Phragmites. When you just scratch your finger on the soil, you hit water. So anybody, you don't need a map to tell you this is a wetland. That's what grows there. You can see it from standing on the path. You could look over and see the Phragmites. So I'm concerned about even the quality of whatever work is being done. Who's directing the digging? Who's telling the bulldozer man which direction to go and how much to pull out? I found that unconscionable, truthfully. I was appalled that a university that has a law school, what do you call those people? You're one. An engineering school. I mean, they have a lot of people who are supposed to know these things. And if I, with no training in it, just kind of an interest from walking around town, can determine this, how did this happen? And how can we protect what's up there, whether it's in the upland or the wetland? When you all go in and start doing things, who's going to be in charge? And if I can just follow that up, I think it's unfair to make it be Kristen. I think that's unfair. Kristen gets to have her own life. She volunteers a lot of time for this town, and it really bothers me to say that people with a whole university behind you need to just wait and let Kristen tell you what to do. So, Kristen, don't do it. Thank you.
How about if, for all work within Conservation Commission jurisdiction, it's reviewed by a third party first, prior to the filing of the notice of intent at your expense?
I mean, to the extent that there's a third-party reviewer for the NOI, I mean, we're talking about reviewing the same plans, right? Talking about the...
Well, any forthcoming work prior to the notice of intent. I mean, everything, the top stuff, Haley and Aldrich is outside of our jurisdiction with the exception of this one item. You're telling me nothing else is going to happen down here before the notice of intent?
Down here means in...
Conservation jurisdiction.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
With the exception of that one test pit, boring.
Well, I think you just told us that that's within an area that we should leave alone.
Oh, good, okay. All right.
I mean, I'm trying to be careful to I get that there's two ways to look at this idea of deferring. It's not intended in any way. I mean, maybe it's helpful to, I don't want to complicate things. I'm hoping this is clarification. But I understand that going to the site, there's a lot of equipment. It's hard to understand what's happening from driving by, and it seems like a lot of violence is being done. This is not approved. We're here because, to our understanding, because we had an outline for the floodplain that we used because the bylaw says don't do work in the floodplain. So we outlined the floodplain and we stayed outside of it. And then we were given additional direction that don't use that outline, use this outline. And then we immediately adjusted our approach to use the other outline for the floodplain. When that other outline is used, then yes, one of the test pits we did, it falls in this other outline. So that's what we're addressing right now is work within what we understand to be the floodplain, and deferring to the Conservation Commission saying, you used one way to understand the floodplain. No, use this way. Okay, so we use that way. So it's a narrow question. It sounds evasive, but I mean that's what we were received an enforcement order about, and that's what we came to comply with, out of respect, to say that if we're going to work together, we're going to move forward. We want to build trust for the notice of intent. That if this is the delineation that we're supposed to use, we're going to use that delineation. Just out of courtesy, respect, deference.
I want to say I appreciate your willingness to do that, but I'm disappointed by the lack of accountability here. This isn't just how I'm choosing to do things. I've spoken to the DEP circuit rider, I've talked to DEP. This is absolutely how this is done. It's by elevation. If it was guided by the maps, FEMA wouldn't assign elevations. So I'm tired of this going around. I appreciate that you're willing to do it, but this is the right way to do it, period. This is the way DEP does it. This is the way Conservation Commissions do it. This is the way consultants do it. This is the way it's meant to be done. This is why FEMA assigns an elevation. So this is,
It is the way that the NOI will be done.
Yeah, okay. And that includes this central area. The whole site needs to be by elevation, not just the area that we...
Understood.
Okay, we're not...
I'm sorry, I have to say one more thing. I'm really tired of hearing "I'm sorry" from Northeastern University. I think that if you, as the university, have any integrity, that you're going to continue to cease and desist on this project until MIPA gives you the approval to move forward. If you care one bit about Nahant, that's the right thing to do.
Sorry about that. As you may know, I'm Jeff Blake from KP Law. Hello. I don't know that this does anything better for you guys, but I guess it does for the TV. Anyway, my name is Jeff Blake from KP Law, and with respect to what you're about to do is, I think they would be two separate things. You're gonna order your conditions to remedy the violation and going forward, and then you would write a ticket through your non-criminal disposition.
We choose to do that, I will issue a letter outlining the conditions before and the things that need to happen before additional work can continue. So the things we had talked about were erosion controls in the vicinity of the disturbed floodplain area, a timeline for work, not necessarily tied to specific dates, knowing that things are fluid, but a order in which things will proceed. In the future, all plans will be coordinated for consultants, so all work occurring will be on one plan. In NIPD's dewatering permit, we'll want a copy before exploratory borings continue. An email or hard copy of the MIPA supplemental info that was provided. And when available, a copy of the boring and test pit logs. Is everyone?
Can you put a time limit on the erosion control when that needs to be up by? They could put
Yes.
it up in a year and say they've complied. We need it done now.
We'll, end of day tomorrow. It's a quick install. You should have erosion controls on site already anyway. So that'll be end of day, Thursday, July 18th. Or how about this, actually? We will lift the enforcement pending installation of the erosion controls. So the sooner they're installed, the sooner we'll lift the enforcement order. That motivates you to get them installed quickly.
Sounds like motivation.
Okay. All right. So with that, do I hear a motion to lift the enforcement order pending installation of the erosion controls? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. And so with that, is there a motion to close the meeting?
Use is permitted in a natural resource zone. Are you aware what uses are permitted in a natural resource zone?
You guys, you can discuss that after the meeting. That's not a conservation issue, okay?
So we're allowing them to come back with
That's
a bulldozer?
the planning board. That is not, or zoning, I'm not sure who that is, but we are wetlands protection only. So outside of our jurisdiction, it's a different board.
So you're going to come back to see the planning board
We have to.
before you set a bulldozer up there?
Those are two different questions, but
Okay.
we have to come back. I assume you're going to be here too.
Yeah, but you could go destroy the upland tomorrow morning if you want.
No, the enforcement order won't be lifted yet. So nothing else will continue on the site.
When's the enforcement order going to be lifted?
As soon as they install the erosion controls and I inspect them.
Okay, so that could happen in a day or two.
It could.
And then they could go up to the uplands.
Unless planning or zoning intervenes. I don't know if it's planning board.
So the planning board could tell them to cease and desist.
That's not my, I don't know. Wetlands Protection Act. DEP levies those. The town does not. The DEP can levy those fines. The town cannot. Oh, is that not true?
I would also suggest that you had voted with respect to the erosion control, but I think there were a number of other conditions that you wanted to impose. Perhaps we should go all through that, and you should vote that as a second.
Rather than a group vote on all of them?
Well, I don't know that you went through your entire list. I think you only got to the MEPA supplemental info submitted, and then you had in there
Test bits and boring logs.
And then I also think, all right, perhaps you had, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So as long, but it seemed like your vote was simply for the erosion control. The next vote should be for the other conditions that you know.
Okay. So do I hear a motion to lift the enforcement order with the aforementioned conditions? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. So with that, is there a motion to close the meeting? Second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you for attending, everyone.